Hey, I'm Damon, and as I've been getting more and more involved in these leftist spaces, both online and locally, I've been thinking more and more about my deeply Christian and spiritual background and about what I have to offer to the world, and realizing that we need to talk more about spiritual health in the leftist conversation if we want to save the world. So I'm sitting outside in today's video because I've been thinking a lot more about my health in general and realizing how important it is when you're doing this kind of work. You see, historically, people who saw injustice and sought to do something about it were always deeply religious people. Over the last couple hundred years, that hasn't been the case as often as it once was. Now we have plenty of people fighting for justice who have no religious affiliation. And I believe a large reason for that is because the institutional church has ignored injustices and even perpetuated injustice time and time again. The church is no longer thought of as the people who are trying to heal the world like they used to be. So now that we have people fighting for justice from outside religion, most people see that as a step in the right direction, especially because there's less special interests. But what we seem to have forgotten is the reason activists who were religious were so effective is because they also had this abundant tradition of spiritual practices and rituals to keep them sane and focused while doing this difficult work. So I want to bring spiritual health back into the conversation among people who are trying to change the world because I think it's really important, and I think a lot of you out there do too. I think what I want to do is help people move from social justice warrior to social justice activist, and since I'm a leftist, also economic justice activist, or of course a revolutionary. When I think of a warrior, I think of a lone soldier running out into a battlefield, screaming and waving weapons toward a massive battalion. And they seem to think if a bunch of them do the same thing, they'll be this unstoppable force, but taking out a few guys doesn't do much. The reason we think a large crowd of people rushing Area 51 is ridiculous is the same reason we often think people who are labeled SJW are ridiculous. Their primary mistake isn't necessarily their politics, but their hyper-individualism. They seem to think that they could change the world by attacking individuals online while keeping the system that creates these individuals largely intact, and ready to reproduce more individuals that you won't like either. My move from liberalism to leftism had a lot to do with the realization that the capitalist powers that be were largely in support of what we call justice today, because they see it as a useful distraction from them. They realized it's really easy to keep people from working against them when so much of the social justice rhetoric looks like being stuck in front of a whack-a-mole machine, whacking every bad person that pops up, sometimes missing, sometimes hitting the wrong person, but there's so many popping up that you know you have to keep whacking away. Leftists want to stop playing the whack-a-mole game and unplug the machine. How do we make this transition? Well, getting educated, first of all, for sure. And one of the amazing things about this leftist YouTube space, or BreadTube, is that it has made so much of the necessary education very, very accessible. So there's a lot out there that can help you get educated. But I also think we need this necessary spiritual health in order to be smart, strategic, and effective in this fight for justice in the most impactful way we can. If you have issue with the word spiritual, I get it. It has been misused in so many horrible ways and very individualistic ways. But just know, I'm not trying to convert anyone to anything or get anyone to believe in anything. I think of it like this. Everything you experience passes through your amygdala, this pair of almond-sized nuclei at the top of your spinal column. Everything goes through the amygdala to get to the rest of your brain like travelers go through airport security, and when it senses a threat, it sets off this alarm system and your entire brain's functions are hijacked into choosing only fight or flight. But as evolved humans, we have the capability to calm down, and through our breathing and our thoughts, we can enable those emotions to go through our neural pathways and reach our prefrontal cortex, the part of the brain that only humans have and is responsible for higher cognitive functions like language, contemplation, and rational decision making. And a lot of people seem to argue politics these days straight from the amygdala as if they're fighting for their life in that very moment. But we're not using all the available functions of our brain when we do that. So what does all of this have to do with spirituality? Well, spiritual practices have always been able to help humans move their emotions up to the prefrontal cortex, because spiritual practices have shown in brain scans over time to shrink the amygdala and thicken the prefrontal cortex, therefore making it way more difficult for us to react in anger and fear, and allow us to respond to these very important issues contemplatively and attentively. And historically, all of these practices were explained as our way of communing with God, but only because everything was explained within the context of our relationship with divine governing powers. We can do a lot of these practices without any God language, but let me warn you, if you actually start to do these practices, over time you may become so conscious of yourself and the world that you may reach a point where you start to think, I've never felt this transcendent before. I wonder if these new feelings are what people are talking about when they talk about God. And at that point, you could attach that feeling to the abundant historical religious traditions that have served humanity for millennia, or not. I'm not trying to get you to believe in God, I'm trying to help you feel more free. So keep an eye out for these next videos that I'll be posting in this series, talking about spiritual health for leftists, talking about meditation, mindfulness, self-care, journaling, shadow work, and more. Don't be scared, it'll be good, I promise. And I'll end with this. As I've been growing in this online leftist space, I've begun to really notice how much antagonism we face when we talk about such heavy subjects and are anti-capitalist, anti-imperialist, and anti-fascist. And after being harassed by actual fascists online recently and it putting me in a bad mood for a day or two, I realized that this subject is more important than ever. Because I would love for my fellow leftists out there to learn resiliency in the face of forces that would like us to shut up or even die. Taking care of your spiritual health is one of the ways we refuse to let the fascists win. If you agree, leave a comment, let me know what you think, share this video with someone so we can keep talking about this. Subscribe for more videos like this, and if you want to hear me expand on some of the stuff I talk about on YouTube in a more freeform and interactive way, follow me on Twitch, twitch.tv/whoisdamon, where we stream every Tuesday and Thursday for now, and so I'll see you over there tonight at 7 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. And you could always support me on Patreon, patreon.com/Damon Garcia. And big shout out to my patrons who are supporting me there already: Karen in Colorado, Ranger Jenny, Refined Your Scene, James Finlay, Jacob McCarthy, Jack, Theory Plebe, and Mike Lodato. Appreciate y'all, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye-bye.